Hi everybody and welcome to another episode of Gaffer in Gear. Today we're going to be looking at some of the mix range from DMG Lumiere. So we've got two of their max mixers, we've got a mini mix, and we're also going to take a look at the digital swatch book. Okay, to start off with, I'm going to go over the point of difference between these lights and others, and then we'll start having a look at the modularity. I don't even know if modularity is a word. Modulability. Basically, we'll just have a look at how these things are modular designed. All right, so let's start off with the point of difference between these and others. So the main point of difference is the LEDs. Most units like this RGBW or warm white, cool white RGB. These are white, phosphor red, which is a broad spectrum red, primary green, lime green, blue, and amber. So let's talk about what difference that makes. All right, so basically in most RGBW units that cost as much as these do, they're color tunable all the way up to 10,000 Kelvin, which is here. Now, most units will go down to 2,800 Kelvin, which is where these units are now, but these units will go down further. The amber chip allows these units to go all the way down to 1,700 Kelvin. Now, here's the other point of difference with the chipset. The range of LEDs that are on this unit help you generate more vibrant colors with your effects colors, in particular between the reds and the yellows. So you get some nice ambers, you get some browns. Browns are very hard to generate. Now the yellows aren't too bad, but the lime green really shows up when you're going in between your yellows, greens and blues on most RGB units. The green is pretty sickly, there's not a lot of detail there, whereas here you can get some pretty nice looking greens. Now at this stage, the DMG family of products comes in three sizes. You've got this mini here, you've got another size in between this and the Maxi. So the Maxi is the largest. Now the Maxis do interlink, so they're a bit like Lego blocks, you can keep building them. But this at the moment is the smallest unit that they have. Now as you can see here, it's got a lot of Kino style mounting plates. Now of course you don't have to mount anything on the back, you can use it in this small form factor. So you could just have this lying flat, for example, and then plug this into the controller. So it's got a separate controller box. Now you can go between here and here with head leads. So I think it comes with a 2 meter head lead. I think you can get an 8. All right, so basically let's start having a look at the back. So let's say we want to mount this onto a light stand. Well, as you probably guessed, we've got mounts that basically just clip on. Okay, so that's basically a gooseneck stand mount, so you can put that on top of a light stand. The other type of mounts you can get are these, which are called lollipops. Now I just want to point something out here. So this gooseneck is the DMG product. Okay, so that's DMG Lumiere. And this is a Kino Flow product. So have a look at the height of the center pins. You'll see that the center pin is much taller on the Kino Flow product. So if you're thinking about using Kino Flow product, the thing is the Kino Flow product will work with the bigger units. Okay, so it doesn't go on easily, but it does get on, but they will not mount onto the mini. Okay, it just won't mount the minis. So that's not going to happen unless you file that down. Okay, but you do have a choice of a lollipop or a gooseneck from DMG. Now, okay, so let's get the stand mount on. Now let's say you don't want the controller to be separate, so you could have the controller, for example, halfway down your light stand plugged in, okay, using the head lead, or you could have it on the back of the unit. So let's mount it to the back of the unit. Okay, so there you go, you've got the controller now mounted on the back. Now, let's say we want to mount our power supply. We can do that too. So this is our AC power supply. And now we've got everything mounted onto the unit, our AC power supply, our controller, all mounted on. Right, now what if you want to use this on a light stand, but you want to run it off batteries? Well, if you want to run it off batteries, then you don't need the AC power supply. So basically, we'll just strip off the AC power supply and put on a battery plate. And there we are, we've now got it running off a V-mount battery. Now let's say you don't want to have it on a light stand, you want to hand hold it. Well, no problem at all. Remove the stand mount, get the handle, which you can buy as a separate item. And there you go, you've now got handheld. You can also get for this thing barn doors, which clip on the front. You can also get a large range of DoP Choice products, such as snap bags and snap grids. The other thing too is you can change the front diffuser. So it comes standard with this flat. You can also get a dome, which gives you more spread. Now, there is another reason why you'd probably want to invest in the dome. One of the problems with the flat diffuser is if you're shooting something that is reflective, there is a chance with the flat diffuser that you can see the individual light sources because the LEDs are so close. However, when you're using the dome, that is not an issue. All right, so let's have a look at the Maxi build and form factor. And I've got to say, as a gaffer who spent a decade and a half working with 4-bank 4-foot Kinos, I was instantly drawn to the shape of these units. Being 4 foot means it's going to wrap. So it's going to be a soft light straight onto the light stand. You know, it's soft straight off the bat. And that is something that really appealed to me. Now, when I got my hands on these for the testing, the first thing that disappointed me with these was it's relatively heavy. So it's, I've got to say, it's not impossible to use if you're working by yourself, but you wouldn't be looking forward to moving this around on the set. It's a little bit on the heavy side. However, once you remove the stirrup and you go to a ball mount, it is fantastic if you're a small time user or a small time operator like me. This is fantastic because now this thing, once you take the power supply off, this thing ends up being 9.1 kilograms. So it is very, very lightweight and easy to maneuver around. So, you know, very, very easy to carry. And the other thing that really got me excited about this, so I am considering buying a few of these, was looking at it this way up. So basically, if I was packing it down, the transformer stores on it. Okay, so everything's together. The lumen radio antenna, which these things always get snapped, that comes off, and there's clips here to put it into. So I don't know why other manufacturers haven't thought of that. The cabling, the power cable, that can coil up in here, and then I can basically twist the gooseneck and have the gooseneck like that, and it's ready to store as is. Now, it doesn't take up a lot of space, it's not very thick. So pretty much, I would just get a bag made up, slot it into a bag, and store this way up on a trolley. Pretty much, it takes up the same amount of space as a 4-bank 4-foot fluorescent Kino flow did. So any sort of system that you used for storing those, you could store these. So you could get quite a few of these stored into a small area on a trolley, no problem at all. Now, in terms of the ball mount here, there is a little bit of play. Okay, so it's okay for, say, using it on stands or your basic day-to-day jobs in location, but you wouldn't want to put it on a car rig. I don't think it would hold up too well. So if you're using a car rig, you definitely want to go the stirrup. Now, what I do like about the stirrup design, they've obviously consulted a few people. One of the problems I have with stirrups is when you're packing a light in the van, you've got the spigot that takes up a lot of space. It just hits the top of the shelving. You end up with, you know, the stirrups on an angle and taking up a lot of space. These guys have got a very clever solution. Basically, the spigot, it unscrews. Okay, you can unscrew that spigot, and then you can Velcro it into place here. So that makes storing this thing with the stirrup a lot more convenient in terms of putting it into a truck or putting it into a van. That's fantastic. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the power supply can be removed. So it's got Nutrix connectors, and the end feeding into the light is a standard 3-pin XLR. So if you lose the cable, no big deal there. And this is just Velcroed in. Now the power supply does have a nice big thread on it for clamping. So if you wanted to, you could put this on your light stand. Next, let's talk about all the mountings, which are 1/4 twist lock. So basically that's all of this stuff on the side. So your stirrup is mounted in with a 1/4 twist lock. You can get plates that enable you to link multiple Maxis together. That's all 1/4 twist lock. And your rigging harness points are also 1/4 twist lock. So I'll explain 1/4 twist lock. So basically you put it on, line it up to the keyways. Okay, and 1/4 of a twist with your Allen key tool, and you're locked. So I'll show you that again. Find the keyway, 1/4 of a twist, and that's now secured in place. If I want to undo it, 1/4 twist, and that's unlocked, 1/4 twist, and that's unlocked. So pretty straightforward to get accessories on and off, or to get rigging on and off. So to illustrate how simple the 1/4 twist lock system is, I'm going to change this over from a single to a double. Now, just in case things were going to turn bad during that setup, I put the handle on, so I had an additional point I could grab just in case. But I think you've got to admit, that was pretty simple to put together. All right, so one thing I better point out, with the bigger unit, just like with the smaller one, you can remove the diffuser, and it does have a dome diffuser as well. Now, while we've got the diffuser off, I just want to show you something, and that is the spacing between each of the LED blocks or each of the LED arrays. So there's a lot of spacing in here. So that's to do, I'm guessing, with heat distribution, because all this is metal. And that's the next thing to point out. There's no cooling fans in this. It is totally passive. Okay, there's no noisy cooling fans. All right, so anyway, the spacing between the LEDs, if you're running it without any diffusion, will give you multiple shadows. Now, what I do like about lights like this where you can remove the diffusion is if you're using a softbox, and there are a lot of DoP Choice products available for this range, and even the double, you can get softboxes for that. If you're running it through a softbox, you can remove this diffusion and just use the diffusion on the outside of the softbox, get a bigger, softer source, but not sacrifice light level because you're not going through two diffusers unnecessarily. All right, let's go through how to drive this thing off the back menu. And this is super easy to use. Now, there is a little bit of a trade-off with it being super easy to use. Anything that's sort of really complex, like XY value coordinates or setting a Rec 709, for example, as your color space, you can't do that on the back here, but you can do it through the phone app. In terms of XY, you can do that through DMX. So they've basically made this as simple as it needs to be, or I suppose in one sense, as complicated as it needs to be. If you're just using the back of the light, you're not really doing anything super complex anyway, so I think they're on the right track. So let's go through the buttons. So we've got our on-off button. Now, quick thing to point out here, if you press it momentarily, it goes to 0. If you press it momentarily again, it goes back to whatever you had it set to. If you want to turn it off for real, you've got to hold the button down. Okay, now the next button down is keypad lock. So hold that down for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, and we're keypad locked. To get the keypad lock off, hold the button down again. Okay, the next buttons across are your main operating modes: gel mode, white mode, and color mode. Now, settings, we won't go into that, but this button is very important. That's your scrolling button. So you press that and it scrolls to the next thing you want to change. So for example, whatever is in the red box is what is selected by the scrolling button. And the next button down below that is library or save delete. So let's have a look at our white mode first. So basically whatever is in red is selected, and that is our dimmer, and it dims in 0.1% increments, so no surprises there. Now, if you press the button, it goes to presets. So 25, 50, 75, 100, okay, and dims in 0.1. Now, I'm actually really keen on buying some of these. So I've thoroughly tested the crap out of them. These lights are super accurate to down to 3%, then below 3%, these go super feral. So don't use these below 3%. So that's my advice there. Okay, let's select the next thing. So use the scroll button. The next thing is Kelvin. So these are tunable from 10,000 Kelvin all the way down to 1,700 Kelvin in 50 Kelvin increments. Now again, if you press the button, it scrolls through to presets. All right, now let's go to our next thing in the white menu. So press the scroll button, and that's our plus minus green. So you can go from full plus green to full minus green or full magenta. Now here's the interesting thing to watch. Again, it 1% increments. Now, if you press the button, it scrolls to presets. So that's a 3/4 magenta, okay, half magenta. So that's the gel equivalent. Quarter magenta, eighth magenta. Now I've just put some random settings into the white light mode, and I'm just going to show you how to save it. So see down here it says save delete. You basically hold that down, and now it's saved. So a bit later on in the video, I'll show you how to recall. Now in terms of color modes on the back of this, you've got gel and you've got your color mode. They're your two modes that you can operate from off the back. Now via phone app and DMX, you can also do XY coordinate value and RGB. Not really RGB, it's again, phosphor red, green, lime green, blue, and amber. So you can basically get your individual channels over DMX, but you can't do it on the back. All right, so let's select color mode. Now, once again, in the color mode, your scroller here selects what you're changing. So you've got the 4 options on each corner. You've got your intensity, which is your brightness. You've got your CCT, which is your base color temperature. So when you desaturate the color, basically get your color and then mix it with white light, you can select the Kelvin point at which you're mixing to. Okay, so that's really good. The next thing down is your saturation level, whether the color is fully saturated or mixed in with white light. And the next one is your hue angle, which is your color. And you've got a nice graphic so you can see what you're changing. Now, I've got to say, one thing I don't like about this, I don't like the layout of the order that things are in, because if I was working, how I tend to do it is I tend to find my color first. So let's say we want that. Then I will choose my saturation amount, which is scroll around. Okay, so let's say that's saturation. Then I would choose my base Kelvin that I'm saturating to, so I've got to scroll around a fair bit to get to that. Okay, then I would select my intensity. So that's the only criticism I've got of this mode is the order that things are in. I think it would make more sense if it was in a different order, but it is relatively straightforward to use. I think you'd learn how to use it in under a minute. Now let's say we want to save this. Again, save delete, just hold that down. Now let's hop into the gels mode. And this is probably the most complicated of all the modes. So basically your scroller selects what it is you're changing. Okay, so that's our intensity. Now our Kelvin is a hard switch between 5.6 and 3.2. That's the only options you got. All right, now you can adjust your saturation, so how saturated the color of the gel is. So you can make it 20% more or 20% less. And if you press the button, you go to presets. The next one is the hue angle. We'll get back to that in a sec. And then the last option is your gels. Now, again, I don't like the order. I reckon the order's backwards, but that's just me. All right, so to select your gels, press the button. And now you've got your gels list. It is a very comprehensive gels list. There is a lot of gels there. Now, you can change the order that the gels are in. So you can go into the setup menu and you can select color or alphabetical. At the moment, they're in number order. So whatever your preference is, you can customize a unit to suit. So let's pick a gel. Now one thing, these are all Roscoe gels, and one thing these guys pride themselves on is that they're color matched by Roscoe. Roscoe certify the gel color as being accurate. Okay, so let's select that by pressing the button. And now we're back into the rest of the menu. Let's change our intensity. Okay, let's maybe go to a 32 base Kelvin. That looks good. Now saturation. Now see, I can make the color brighter or less bright. Okay, so that's you've got a trim there that you can do. Now the next one is hue angle. So basically visualize your color vector. So let's say this is very, very close to the color that we want, but not quite right. So we can shift it on the color vector. So whatever point this gel's pointing at on the color vector, we can shift it a little bit. So let's go to our hue angle and have a look. So you can move it plus or minus 10 degrees in terms of the color hue. So you've got quite a bit of trimming there on your gels mode. So after you've done all that sort of trimming and you found the color that you want, you of course are going to want to save it, right? So hold down the menu button, hold down the library button, and now it is saved. All right, now let's hop into the settings, basically your menu. So let's hop into settings. Okay, so first one is Bluetooth on and off. The next thing down is your DMX mode. Now this is very interesting, so press the button to select. Okay, you can select your DMX in. At the moment it's set to Lumen radio, but if I scroll around, my choices are Wi-Fi, R mode. Now R mode is receiver mode, so that's like master and slave. So if you've got another one of these set up as the master and you want this one as the slave, you set the input into R mode. So I think of that as receiver mode. And the transmitting mode is T. So it might mean something else in French, I don't know, but I think of it as receiver. You got none, of course. XLR, so hardwired input. Local area network, and back to CRMX. Now, because I've scrolled off CRMX, I now have to relink it if I'm going to use this. Next one across is your DMX address. That's pretty straightforward. Now, next one is your profile selections. So what I like about selecting your profiles on this is it comes up here what is in the profile. So for example, if we're looking to control the LED channels individually, this one does that. Okay, and it tells you whether it's 8-bit or 16-bit, so that's pretty cool. My favorite one I use is number 2. That does basically everything I need it to do and real simple. Next thing is disable DMX active. So you got enable or disable DMX active. Okay, next is the DMX out, and this is where this gets really, really interesting. Okay, now at the moment it's set to no DMX out, but my options include XLR out, so yeah, okay, no worries. CRMX out, so Lumen radio out. So that's where this is really, really interesting. Let's say you're looking to buy some of these and you're looking to get into Lumen radio, but you can't afford a transmitter, like say an AKS. You can use any of the Max Mix lights. You can use any of those as your Lumen radio transmitter. So basically, if I feed DMX into this, it'll transmit that DMX out. All right, now let's have a look at the next option is T mode. So basically transmit mode. So if you're using this as a master for manual control here, it'll then send the signal out to your other mix units via cable. All right, so let's scroll through the rest of the menu and see what's in there. Okay, so the next thing down is dimmer curve, and that's got all the usual suspects: linear, square wave, S-curve, tungsten emulate. So tungsten emulate is, say you've got a 5K tungsten light. If you fade it from 100 to 0, it'll have a little bit of an afterglow in it. This basically emulates it, so this will match into your tungsten lights. Next thing down, gel sorting. So you can sort your gels alphabetically, numerically, or by color. So not worth going through that. RDM on and off. Factory settings. Now, factory settings has something I like. You can choose whether you're setting this thing completely back to factory settings, as in erasing all the memory, or you can reset the functions back to factory settings, but keep your memories, so keep all of your saves. So that's pretty cool. Next thing down is zone select. Okay, so this thing has 2 light engines. Okay, so in your zone select, you can determine whether you're operating both light engines, or one light engine, or the second light engine. So if you want to get into that, I'd suggest doing it via DMX is a lot easier than doing it manually. So if you're using the thing, for example, you've hired it and you're playing with the controls, but only one half of the light's working, it's not broken. Somebody's just got it set to zone 2 or to zone 1 and not zone 1 and 2. All right, the last thing to go through on the back is the library button. And you remember earlier we saved things? Well, this is where they got saved to. So let's press the library button. Again, your scroller selects what you're looking at in your library. So our choice is My Mix, which is this unit. So basically all the things that are saved in this unit are saved there. You've got your Roscoe Gels library, which you've already looked at. Source matching. Okay, so source matching is, look, the first 2 options, green screen and blue screen, and then the rest are common lights that you'd come across out in the real world. So basically things like sodium vapor lights, different sort of street lights, practical lights, common light sources that you're going to come across that are non-film industry. The next one across is effects. So the effects is pretty limited. You've got different emergency vehicles. You've got fire and TV screen, that's about it. Now, once you've selected your effect, you press the scroller button and you can change the speed and intensity. The effects could do with a bit of work. That's probably the best way to be nice about it. I wouldn't be hugely excited about the effects. So let's go back to our My Mix. So earlier we saved things. This is where they got saved to. So this is where you can recall what you've saved. Okay. Now let's say you want to delete something out of here. Okay. So basically you hold down the Save Delete. Do you want to delete it? Yes, and deleted. So pretty simple to use. All right, so let's start looking at the phone app, and here's where I want to start with it. This phone app is brilliant for this reason. The phone app is designed to work in conjunction with your Lumen radio and DMX. So for example, you can use the phone to change the profiles on the lights. So here's what I mean. I've got my light set up, so it's got CCT on one channel, and I can then change my effects colors. But I can't do plus or minus green in this profile. So if I want to do that, what I do is go to my phone app. I then pull up the light, select the controller settings, select my DMX, and I can change the color profile. So let's change this to color profile 1. Okay, now I go into my Lumen radio and change to a matching profile, and simple as that. Now I've got the profile I want without having to go to my light or pull my light out of the lighting grid. Now, when you go to use the phone app for the first time, you have to log in. So you have to enter in your email address and a password. And that's the same for every new device that you go to. So the reason you do that is all of your saves, anything that you save in the app, isn't just saved on the device. It's also saved on the cloud or whatever it's called. So basically, if you're using another device, you can recall all your saves. So for example, if I've got something saved in this phone and then my phone dies or my phone gets broken or I forget to bring it the next day, I can use someone else's phone with the app and recall my saves. All right, so when you're basically using this, down the bottom here, you select what light you want to use, or you scan for new lights, and then you basically select the light that you want. So that's the light we're going to operate, and we're off and running. So let's start off looking at white mode. Now, one of the things I like about this phone is the amount of ways you can input your settings. So we're just going to do intensity. So we can do minor adjustments here. We can do keyboard adjustments. So let's say 50%, apply. And we've got a large touchscreen area. Now, the advantage of the large touchscreen area is quite often we've got gloves on, and when you've got gloves on, you can't use a touchscreen. So that area is so large, you can use your wrist, and you can even use your elbow. So if you think I'm exaggerating here, let's do a fade down using my elbow. So let's change the setting down. Let's see if I can get around 50%. Okay, close enough to 50%. Not bad for just my elbow. Okay, so that does come in handy. Okay, so let's go apply. All right, now CCT, pretty much the same. CCT, you can apply little values. You can enter in, so let's say 3,200, apply, or you can basically up and down on the touchscreen section. All right, so next up, let's have a look at the gels mode. So basically, here's your gel selection, and you've got nice, pretty swatches, so you can see what it is you're picking. Okay, let's go apply. You can select your Kelvin. Now remember, it's a hard switch. Okay, apply. Intensity, and again, large keypad area or small adjustments. Okay, apply. And you can adjust your saturation up or down, plus or minus 20%. And you can adjust your hue angle as well. Okay, so the next mode we'll have a look at is the color modes. So HSI, pretty much like on the back of the light, you've got your 4 options. But what's really cool is your hue. So the graphical interface is really, really nice on this. So let's say we find a color that we like. Let's say that looks pretty cool. And let's now adjust our saturation. So it's pretty straightforward to use, pretty intuitive. Okay, let's go apply. Now you could also press the graphic there and use a color map if you prefer to do it that way. So that's very cool. Apply. Now you've got another option in terms of choosing your color, which is XY coordinate. Okay, so you can dial in XY coordinate values if you want. Okay, we're not going to play around with that too much. Or you can go on the graphic. Okay, now here's where the graphic's cool. So not only can you apply color here, but you can change the color space to suit your camera. So you could go a Rec 709, for example, and stay only within Rec 709 color space. Or if you've got a camera that's a little bit more pricey, you can work in the Rec 2020 color space. Now, another way you can enter a color using the phone app is through the capture. The capture allows you to take a photo or use an existing image. So let's say, for example, we want to use the yellow off my IMDb credit card. Well, so basically you select the part of the screen that you want to grab for your color, press apply, and that's now in the light. Now, when you do this, it won't look like a perfect match, and that's because of saturation. Basically, if you turn all the other lights off in the room, then you'll see that the saturation is correct. That actually is IMDb credit card yellow. All right, now let's say we want to adjust this. Well, no problem at all. We can then go into our saturation mode and then adjust our saturation to suit. Now, there are two other modes in the phone app, which is effects and source matching, but I think you get the idea of how the phone app works, so I can't be bothered going through those. Now, remember these things, swatch books, where you had all the gels. Now, forget about those. DMG Lumiere have the digital equivalent. So this is the mini book, so digital swatch book. So you need the phone app to run one of these. This is apparently under 100 Australian dollars. So that's a rough price I've been given. Now, in case you're thinking of buying one of these and using it as a little light because it's so cheap, it's got a few limitations. It only runs at 50% or 100% brightness, so you can't dim it. And also the special effects don't work. You can't run special effects on it. It doesn't have processing power for that. It's basically just designed as a miniature swatch book. So let's have a quick play with it. Let's go to our colors. So as you can see, we can adjust our hue and saturation. And you can have a play around with your gels. So basically you get the idea. It's basically a digital swatch book. So before we get underway with the technical part of the review, there is something I've just noticed on the Mini Mix. If you want to run it in this orientation and you want to run it off battery, you can't get a battery on because the handle's in the way. Now, I did find with the unit, if you have it horizontal and then put the battery on, you can rotate it to vertical, but you can't tilt it because the ball mount is in an odd position now. Anyway, let's get into the technical review, and I'm just going to do an overview first, because I've had a lot of gaffers contact me, knowing that I'm testing this, asking, do the 6 color emitters really make a difference? And the answer is yes and no, so it depends how you're going to use it. So firstly, I'll go over the benefits that this thing has with its 6 LED emitters. Basically, it has an increased CCT range, so it goes all the way down to 1700 Kelvin. So that's the most notable advantage. Now, above 2800 Kelvin, so in its entire range above 2800 Kelvin, these things really do have superior white point accuracy. So they are very, very close to the Planckian curve, closer than any other bicolor or RGBW light I've tested. Now, I've got to be careful how I word this. Okay, so these things have superior range, a superior range of full saturated effects colors. So full saturated effects colors. All right, now let's talk about where the 6 phosphor mix really makes no difference, and that is color render. So compared to top line RGBW and RGBWW lights, the 6 phosphors really makes no difference to color render. If anything, it is slightly under that of the existing top range products. Now, in terms of where the phosphor mix actually performs worse, and this is a bit of a surprise for me, where it actually is worse is when you are desaturating effects colors. So basically, if you've got a HSI mode running, for example, and you desaturate a color to say 50%, and then you meter it, the target value you've entered in on the lights won't be close to what you've got on the meters. So it's just something to point out there because it's a little bit of an unfair statement. I haven't come across any lights yet in the film industry where you can accurately desaturate a color and hit the target value. These ones just perform a little bit worse than everything else that's on the market. Now, the next thing a lot of you wanted to know was how does the Maxi Mix compare in terms of brightness to other 4-foot lights that we have in the industry. Well, basically, this unit comes in at roughly over 3 times brighter than a Kino Flow Freestyle 41, and it comes in at 2/3 the brightness of an RE Sky Panel S120. Now, the next thing a lot of you want to know is how flicker-free is it, or is it flicker-free? Now, the fastest shutter speed I can generate on any of my cameras is 1/23,550th of a second. So at full brightness, I couldn't get any flicker out of these units at that speed. So at 1/23,550th of a second, no flicker. Now, when I dimmed the units below 10%, I did get what I'd perceive to be minimum flicker. So there's a bit of flicker there once you dim it all the way down to 10%. And again, that's at a 23,550th of a second shutter, but I gauge it to not really be a problem. Now let's talk about brightness, and all of these readings are taken at a distance of 3 meters. Let's start with the mini mix. At 3,200 Kelvin, it came in at 292 lux. At 4,400 Kelvin, it came in at 302 lux. And at 5,600 Kelvin, it came in at 305 lux. So very consistent brightness across its range. Now let's have a look at the brightness of the Maxi mix. At 3,200 Kelvin, it came in at 1,200 lux. At 4,400 Kelvin, it came in at 1,250 lux. And at 5,600 Kelvin, it came in at 1,250 lux. Now let's have a look at how accurately the Mix series targets its CCT values. All right, so from 1,700 Kelvin to 2,800 Kelvin, it is accurate to typically plus 22 Kelvin. In the warm whites, that's 2,800 to 4,000 Kelvin, the accuracy is typically 38 Kelvin. In the mid whites, 4,000 to 5,000 Kelvin, you're looking at an average accuracy of plus 35 Kelvin. In the cool whites, 5,000 to 6,000 Kelvin, you're looking at an accuracy of about 50 Kelvin. Now let's have a look at the white point accuracy, or the DuV scores. Now these units perform at their worst below 2,800 Kelvin. Below 2,800 Kelvin, they are highly reliant on the amber emitter to generate the colors. So they can't use a mix or a large mix of all the other emitters to help vector in a better white point. All right, so at 1,700 to 2,800 Kelvin, the units are typically accurate to minus 30 DuV increments. Now, to give you some idea of that, because I'm making it sound bad, that's less than a 1/4 correction gel. All right, let's have a look at the warm white. So that's 2,800 to 4,000 Kelvin. These units are typically accurate to minus 5 DuV. Now 4,000 to 5,000 Kelvin, that's your mid whites. These units are typically averaging minus 2 DuV increments of accuracy. So to give you some idea of scale, that is accurate to within 1/5 of a 1/8 correction gel. So I'll let you do the maths on that, 1/5 of a 1/8 correction gel. Okay, at 5,000 to 6,000 Kelvin, your cool whites, these things are again accurate to minus 2 DuV on average. Now let's have a look at television lighting consistency index scores. Okay, so below 2,800 Kelvin, these things perform at their worst. There is quite a range of scores in here. So the lowest score was 66, and that was right at the bottom, right at 1,700 Kelvin. And at 2,800 Kelvin, these were scoring 94. The average score was an 84. Now in your warm whites, the average score is a 97. In your mid whites, the average score is a 98. In your cool whites, the average score is a 98 again. Now let's have a look at the TM30 color vector results. Below 2,800 Kelvin, there was quite a range of scores. The lowest score was an 80, and that was at 1,700 Kelvin. The highest score in this section was a 92%, and that was at 2,800 Kelvin. The average score in this range was 89. Now in your warm whites, 2,800 to 4,000, the average score was a 92. In your mid whites, the average score was a 91. And in your cool whites, the average score was a 92. Now let's have a closer look at our more common Kelvins. When you dial in 3,200 Kelvin, you get 3,202 Kelvin with a TLCI score of 96. Color vector testing reveals a more accurate score would be 92 with an average of 100% color saturation. Here are the individual CRI scores, and as you can see, R9 and R12 are below 90. Color mapping reveals that the DuV point is out by 0.0006 DuV increments, which is roughly the equivalent of 1/4 of a 1/8 correction gel. And here is the color spectrum analysis. Now when you dial in 4300 Kelvin, you get 4330 Kelvin with a TLCI score of 98. TM30 color vector testing reveals a more accurate score would be 91% with an average color saturation of 99%. Here are the individual CRI scores, and R12 is the lowest score at 74.9. Everything else is above 95. Color mapping reveals an extremely accurate white point at 0.0002 DuV. And here is the color spectrum. When I dialed in 5600 Kelvin, I got 5668 with a TLCI score of 98. Color vector testing revealed a more accurate score would be 91% color rendition with an average 100% saturation. Here are the individual CRI scores, and R12 is the lowest at 72.4, and the next lowest is R9 at 90.7. Everything else is above 94. And the white point was out by minus 0.0002 DuV. And here is the color spectrum. Now let's take a look at the accuracy of the HSI mode, starting with full saturation primary colors. When I dialed in red, which should be 0 degrees, I got 2 degrees. Green was smack on the money at 120 degrees. The blue color vector was also smack on the money at 240 degrees. Now let's have a look at our secondary colors. Yellow, which should be 60 degrees, came in at 40. However, it is worth pointing out that this is a really rich looking yellow. Unlike an RGB unit, there is plenty of spectrum here. Cyan, which should be 180 degrees, came in very close for a secondary color at 174 degrees. And magenta, which is 300 degrees, came in surprisingly close at 304 degrees. Now let's have a look at our primary colors desaturated to 50%. And for those of you who want to know, this is tested to the D65 standard. Red came in at 3 degrees with 22% saturation. Green, which should be 120 degrees, came in at 120 degrees with 38% saturation. Blue came in at 246 degrees with 86% saturation. Yellow came in at 43 degrees with 63% saturation. Cyan came in at 167 degrees with 50% saturation. And magenta was very close for a desaturated secondary color at 304 degrees with 36% saturation. Now just for giggles, this is our amber spectrum, and this is the lime spectrum. Before we go, a big thank you to the Australian distributor of this product, which is Technical Art Solutions, for letting me have these for over a month. See you on the next episode of Gaffer in Gear.